So I realized very early on that my family wasn't like the average normal family you saw in the movies, where it was always about Christmas and about giving gifts and about teaching your kids something and about having a grandma that spoils you. I realized very early on, because when I was a kid, I think my grandma told me one day during Christmas, this wasn't no Santa Claus, this was your mom, go tell her thank you. I knew things were different then because she was just always and is always so real. And I also remember the day my grandma bought me a little chick. You know, like a chicken, but before it's a chicken, it's a little chick. And she paid like around a penny for it. And then this little chicken became a chicken, a real live big chicken. And one day I'm looking for my chicken, and after we have lunch, she's like, guess what? We ate the chicken. You ate it, you liked it, still stop it. And I realized that like my grandma just really doesn't have a filter. She's very protective, but she's also very frugal, and that's something I love about her. Because what she instilled in me with little lessons about money that I learned later on is kind of made me the person I am today, and it made her kids the way they are today. They all took different traits from her, and that's why they're all pretty solid people overall. Now, in this video, I'm gonna give you these 7 lessons, extreme lessons, that my grandma basically taught me. And by the way, these stories might make my grandma seem like she's kind of like very stiff, but no, my grandma is the most loving person I know. She bought me ice cream, she took care of me. I felt very safe around my grandma all the time, and still to this day. So my grandma's awesome, but she's just not one of those movie grandmas because she grew up with nothing whatsoever and had 8+ kids, so she had to be very real about her finances all the time. Things were very serious, okay? As always, guys, like this video. On top of that, also subscribe, hit the bell, shit notified. And guess what? Today, because I'm talking about my grandma, we are not going digital. We are going back to paper. So I wrote all my notes on this paper, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what these 7 lessons are, starting with number 1. Number 1 is always reinvest the profits. And you might think, Tommy, if your grandma was so poor, where there wasn't even a toilet in the house, and there really wasn't even a floor in the house, and the water came from the river, how can you reinvest anything? There's no money, right? The answer is, whenever you're super broke, anything you make is a profit. And what you do with that money is extremely important. So one story I heard from my grandma was basically, when she was just getting started, she started to buy animals. It's how crazy this stuff is, okay? She started to buy animals. She started to breed them. She started to sell them. And all of a sudden, she had a whole full-blown business. And all the money she made, she reinvested. And with that money, she was able to buy her first plot of land. And that's where she lives today. And that's pretty cool. Now, number 2, so basically, you reinvest the profits. Don't be stupid and grab all your money, spend it on trash that doesn't really make you anything whatsoever. She's very real about that. Now, number 2 is basically diversify into real estate. So yeah, although she was a businesswoman, she was doing animals, she was doing grocery stores, she always grabbed a portion of those profits and set it aside, and she started to build a little rental property behind her own house. And today that's a much bigger house, but that rental property, which by the way at some point had like 3 people living in it, she got income from it. And that basically made sure that when business was going slow, she had a passive income to help her basically take care of business in the house. Again, this lady is a genius. And did I mention she doesn't know how to read? Okay, that's how crazy this actually is. Number 3, don't be wasteful. That's one thing my grandma always taught me. If she gave you a plate of food, she would not appreciate it if you basically wasted it. If you grab all the food you could and you ate it, no problem. But whenever she sees someone that's basically wasteful with what they have, with the food, with the money, those are things she basically doesn't appreciate whatsoever, because she knows what it is to have nothing, and she knows people that don't have anything either. And it's kind of like, what you have, you use enough, and you don't waste anything. All right, that's a very valuable lesson. And sometimes, you know when your parents are like, don't throw that food away because somebody's out there hungry. I learned that, it's kind of like kind of foolish in a sense, but it's a real thing, So for me personally, whenever I'm thinking about doing something, I just don't overdo it. I just grab enough that I know this is enough for me. I'm fine, I'm good. I'm not gonna get sick from it. I'm not gonna be like, like a blob or super wasteful. And I appreciate that little lesson. So it's because it teaches you how to value things. Number 4, better to have it than to look like you have it. That's one big thing, My grandma was never into appearances. Till this day, I don't see her as being like this appearance lady. But I do know a lot of the people she knows that are very big into appearances. Like she had this one friend that would always come by with all this jewelry, all this stuff. And my grandma would say, it's better to have something, Tommy, than it is to appear like you have it, but you really don't. And what that means is, my uncle always says this too, there are so many people out there that the reason they're broke is because they're trying to make everybody else think that they're not broke. So they spend a lot of money, all their money, trying to look like they have money, like they're well off, but in reality, they're not doing that well. So my grandma always focused on, let's make sure we have what's actually necessary, which is basically money and trying to build something and trying to be stable, right? Than it is to say, hey, let's buy all these fancy clothes and all this other stuff just to prove to other people we have some stuff. No, that stuff never mattered. Now, number 5 is, there's a difference between a necessity and a need. No, I think I said that backwards. There's a difference between a necessity and a want, or a need and a want. And she made that very obvious. You know, a want is anything that's not basically shelter, food, and water, and basically just regular utilities. Everything else outside of that is just a want. And when you really cut it down to the core, the reason she thinks like this is because basically at its core, it's the most phenomenal truth. If you slice a human being, right, and you take down all the finances, all we really need is, aside really from even shelter, is really just some food and like a shirt. And that's basically it. We're good to go, honestly. But having some shelter, having some food, having water, having basic utilities, basically you're good. Essentially you're covered. So once you know what your needs really are, you focus on those, you handle those, then you worry about the wants. But a lot of people think that what their wants are, they're actually needs, and that's not true. You don't need to spend $1,000 on makeup, on Gucci purses, on an iPhone, or anything like that. In reality, the basics are the basics, and the wants are just things that you kind of want, okay? So be very careful with that. My system is, I don't spend more than 10% of my money when it comes to fun. You know, and like those are like the wants. You know, if I want to give a gift, if I want to buy myself something, no more than 10% of the money I make, because at that point you're doing too much. Okay. Now, number 6, always compare prices. I've never been, by the way, this was also passed on to my mom, which is basically whenever we went somewhere or when I was looking to buy something, my mom would always call me and say, Tommy, whatever you're trying to buy, go look somewhere else. Go look somewhere else. And she does that all the time. So if I'm trying to buy some sneakers, I'm trying to buy a car, if I'm trying to buy a house, you see, all these things matter because sometimes you might not think it's a big deal. Like you found this very good deal. Oh my gosh, I gotta buy it right now. Sometimes that's the case and you know the difference. But sometimes, for example, you're looking at a property. It's very expensive. And you're like, whoa, this is the only one of the kind. Somebody's gonna come and snatch it from us. We gotta buy it right now. No, not really. Go look around at more houses. There might be a better deal out there. Something that's actually better and cheaper and makes more financial sense in reality. And I've learned that valuable lesson. So before I do something, I'm always telling myself, look around. Even though what I want is kind of like, okay, I'm gonna buy, just forget about looking around. No, you gotta look around and shop around for prices. Not just on the small stuff like, oh, by the way, if I'm in a supermarket and you have like a $1 bean and like a $1.20 bean, I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna grab the $1 bean because the other one is like 20, like I don't really care about that, right? But like on big things that matter, you gotta be very careful with that stuff. Don't just go for the first option. Compare, and look around and shop around. Now, number 7. I feel like I skipped one. I'm not sure. Maybe I did. Now, number 7. We wish you had this in digital, right? Number 7 is watch over what you have. You know, nothing in this life is ever really passive. And that's very true, you know. Whenever I was trying to do, for example, investing into passive income, I realized very early on that if you take on this wholeheartedly passive approach, you might miss some things. You might miss when the market is basically down and you should be investing more. You might miss, for example, when the market is super inflated and you might want to consider to sell something. You might miss, for example, when your portfolio is not really that good anymore and you might want to change it and switch it up. You might miss when you buy a property and all of a sudden you don't realize that the tenant is basically deteriorating it and basically doing dumb stuff to it and basically taking it apart or whatever, okay? The idea is you have things that are passive, but nothing's passive in the sense that there's no investment out there that you just close your eyes and don't look over. So one thing she does is when it comes to her money, it comes to her investments, when it comes to her household, in some way, in kind, she's involved in it in some way. So that's why, you know, before I ever hire someone for a job or before I ever do something, I always do the job myself so I know what it entails. So before I hired an editor, like not Paul's the editor here, but before I hired an editor a long time ago, I figured out how to edit myself so I knew what the game actually looks like, how things work, what to expect. Before I hired somebody to do my thumbnails, you know, I went ahead, I did all my thumbnails for a long time and I knew how the game works. I know how long it takes. I know how much it actually costs, like time and all that stuff, right? So once you understand how something works, before I went ahead and said, you know what I want to do? I want to hire a financial advisor. I want to go get life insurance. No, I went ahead and I looked it up myself so I can actually know exactly what does it entail. Do I actually need that or do I not need that? You know what I mean? So that's very important. Now let me just count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're done. Yeah, so that's basically it. Guys, those are 7 things that my grandma taught me. Apparently, she did not teach me how to count. But overall, guys, these might seem like they're very basic rules, but at its core, finance and personal finance and making money and passive income, all this stuff is very basic because at the end, what you're doing is you're spending less than you make, you're using the rest of it to make you more money, and over the long term, it works out. And it's basically, in a way, that plus delayed gratification. And today, you know, one thing she also taught me is basically you got to be patient in life. And it's better to have something that brings you peace than to have a lot that doesn't bring you peace. She always tells me that, you know, when she prays, she says, God, give me things that don't come with problems, because everything that you give is good and is bountiful. And that to me is very awesome, you know. So a lot of lessons. Comment down below any lessons you learned from your grandparents or, for example, from your parents. And by the way, I will say all this stuff sounds cool on paper, and comment down below grandma, so I know you made it all the way to the end. But one fault that I will say my grandma has, and I have to be honest, right, is that when you live a life like this, kind of like this life of being very frugal, extremely frugal in a sense, where you have to feed like 8 kids, where you have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, are we going to have enough money, you know? And by the way, none of her kids ever starved or were worried about food, but because she was there, she was conscious about all the risks, so she didn't take a lot of risks, which isn't necessary because she was going patient and she was being very smart. But overall, one thing I will say is that when you live this very frugal, minimalistic lifestyle, and you think that money is kind of like, how do I say this? Finite in a sense, right? You start to believe that even when you have enough, you don't have enough. What I mean is, for example, my grandma today, she's about 76, 78 years old, I think it is. And, you know, if you ask her you want some fish, she loves fish, but she wouldn't buy it. It's too expensive. Or if you say you want to go over here, how much does it cost? You know what I mean? She's always worried about money in a sense, even though she has enough. So this mindset, you have to learn in a way how to have a balance between enjoyment and taking care of business. You know, that's why, for example, for a long time, I wouldn't have anything that I would spend on fun. All the money would just be invested. And I realized that you won't magically just change once you have what you want, because by that point, those habits would be set in stone. That's why today, whenever I get paid, I take 10%. I just go out with some friends, get some dinner, some games, maybe buy me something on Amazon, and just learn to enjoy money. Because at the end of the day, you might say money is finite, but is it really? They print that thing like paper, because it is paper, and you can always get another job or so on, right? So unless you're stupid with money and you're just very wasteful, you probably won't end up in a spot where you're very super worried about money. You just take things step by step. But obviously, I will say this, if you're not debt free, if you don't have a full-blown emergency account, you should not be spending anywhere near 10% for fun. You do what you need to do first. Before I started doing that, I bought my own house. I paid cash for it. I handled my business, you know what I mean? So I have my emergency fund like fully secured. So it's kind of like you do what you need to do, the necessities first, the needs first, and then you start to live it up a little bit more. But don't forget, live it up in small frequencies while you're getting into the journey, because maybe when you make it, you might not be able to change that. Or you might not make it, and then you never really enjoyed anything. You know, that's also a possibility. But guys, thanks for watching. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified, comment down below any questions, and as always, long-term team officially out. Follow me on Instagram at Tommy Bryson. Up here is another video, and over here's my face, click subscribe, and as always, long-term team out.